Hi, it's Griffin Campbell again to talk to you about set 4 of the All-State Music for Saxophone. It's Etudes number 7 and 10 from the Fairling Etudes. So we'll start with number 7. And it has a number of difficulties. One of them is there's not a specific metronome marking. It says largo, and I like to think of it as a largo in 4 instead of in 8. So a nice kind of lilting kind of quality to it, so it doesn't get all bogged down. It's very possible to get involved in phrases that you can't complete in a single breath if you take it too slowly. So take a listen to the example that I've played for you, and I like that tempo a lot, obviously. The second thing is there are a number of trills in here, and it's easy to get lost in a trill for time, so practicing with metronome is absolutely essential. You want to make sure that your trill has a good flow. You start the trill slowly and move more quickly toward the end. And all of these trills have little terminations on them, so you want to be able to be sure that you get that little termination in at the end, a little grace note figure at the end. So the way to practice that is just as a 5 or 7 or 9 note figure. Make sure that you've got that odd number of notes, and that's one of the difficulties. We're used to playing 4s or 6s and 3s, but 7 and 9, that's a little more difficult. So be sure you start your trill slowly, build the speed up toward the end, and then insert the termination on the trill. Most of these trills are pretty simple. The D sharp to E, you don't actually have to pick up both fingers. All you really have to do is move this one. But if it's easier for you to go ahead and flop them both around, that's fine. But it's a lot cleaner if you only move one finger. Okay? Great. So the F sharp to G trill, of course, is easy. It's self-explanatory. At the very last trill in the piece, though, is from high C to D. And most of you are absolutely going to finger that D this way. And I do too when I start the trill from C to D. But as the trill speeds up, I begin to use my index finger on the E flat key and trill here. It sounds a little weird, but if you start toward on the full fingering and then shift to here, you can get a pretty nice trill going. Now the difficulty there is getting your finger to move back to the B. So you can't get all tense and weird with your index finger. You've got to be in a good position to get back to the B key. It's a very difficult set of fingerings to pull off, but it's worth your practice. Okay, great. Let's see, the other difficulties here are primarily dynamic and attack. This requires you to play softly and loudly and very little in between. So you want to make sure that your soft sound is delicate and beautiful, and you want to make sure that your loud sound is also powerful but not ugly. And one of the ways to work on this was through long tones, and I'm sure you've all heard of those. Turn your metronome on at 60, or get a clock with a sweep second hand and take a look at it. And you know what a second hand is, right? Sure. Or you can get a digital clock that counts the seconds. A stopwatch, anything is fine. And try to make yourself play 10 to 20 second long tones. So you've got a single pitch that you're going to play and sustain from pianissimo to forte and back to pianissimo again. So it's about 12 seconds, a rise of 6 seconds, a fall of 6 seconds. That's the kind of thing you want to be working toward. You want to be able to do it in all registers. There is your difficulty, because doing that in the low register, it's tough. Doing it in the high register, it's also tough. But again, it's worth your practice time to be able to do that, to take a low C. So we'll do our best. So obviously it's worth my practice time to do that a little more too. It's very difficult to do those notes very softly. In the upper register, we have a couple of attacks that have to come out of nowhere. You've got to make a high E happen, so it's really important that you just sit down and play high E's. Play a bunch of them in a row, and don't criticize yourself too much, okay? Don't beat yourself up about the fact that occasionally you're going to get, and occasionally you're going to get. Occasionally it's going to be gross, but you want to find that E and do it over and over again. From a dead stop, right? Not, well, that way you've practiced making a really bad sound. Well, it's not a bad sound, it's just a sound. It's not a bad one, but you've practiced making the sound you don't want. Don't make the sound you don't want over and over again. Make the sound you want over and over again. You have to do it after a breath because that's what happens there in the third line. You got a low E, then you have to take a breath and play. You want to be sure you can do that because that's an error I hear all the time in auditions. So practice, 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 practice. One more thing. The real difficulty here is the fourth line of this thing, where you have to play softly and do big leaps. These big leaps are a real difficulty for a lot of younger students, and they're a difficulty for a lot of older students too, and professionals. A lot of people insist on articulating the descending leap, like and you can do that, but you don't have to. You can develop the skill of moving back and forth between those notes without articulating. A to B, G to G, C to E, and A to D sharp. And then in the second section of this, there's more of the same. A lot of this has to do with taking enough mouthpiece. If you're taking too little mouthpiece, the very tip of the mouthpiece is all I've got in my mouth. You've got to take enough mouthpiece so that the lower note will respond. If you don't have enough mouthpiece in your face, you're working against physics, I guess, or something. It feels like physics to me. You've got to take enough mouthpiece so that your lower lip is at the point where the mouthpiece and the reed separate from each other. If you're taking less than that, you're going to have a problem. And your sound will probably be kind of reedy, kind of spitty, kind of like that. And I'm sure you've heard that either from yourself or from your colleagues in band. Take enough mouthpiece, and that problem will go away, and the problem of making these leaps back and forth will go away as well. Good luck.